Hey guys, tonight we're drifting into a sleepy snowfall one that starts high above you, somewhere in the breathless stillness of a winter cloud. You're lying on your back in a frozen field, your jacket crinkling softly beneath you. The sky is a dull pewter gray, but if you squint long enough, you'll see it. A single speck, just barely distinguishable from the haze, beginning its long, slow fall. That's our flake. And its story? Honestly, you probably won't survive long enough in that atmosphere to see it form in person, but no worries. That's what imagination is for. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and what time you're listening to this. I love seeing where my sleepy little science travelers come from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your ascent into the upper troposphere, that part of the atmosphere where clouds hover around 10,000 feet. There's no wind up here, just a kind of floating hush, as if the world's been tucked in. In this chilled cradle, water vapor is doing something extraordinary. Unlike your hot shower that fogs the mirror instantly, vapor up here doesn't rush to condense. It waits. The air is supercooled moist but below freezing, like a room full of introverts holding party snacks but waiting for someone else to talk first. Then something tiny arrives, a fleck of dust, or a stray pollen grain. Or if the universe is feeling a bit chaotic ash from a volcano halfway across the world, this is the catalyst. The icebreaker at our icy cocktail party. Instantly, vapor molecules cling to it. Not just randomly, they organize themselves, stacking in a precise hexagonal pattern. The water molecules are acting like overachieving IKEA builders, clicking into place, 6 at a time. Hydrogen bonds love a good symmetrical structure. You're now standing okay, hovering beside the very beginning of a snowflake. It's not beautiful yet. It's just a tiny hexagonal prism, smaller than a red blood cell. But it's growing. Quietly, stubbornly, like someone trying to build a snowman out of sugar cubes. At this altitude, nothing is rushed. The flake's shape is determined by temperature and humidity, two very picky sculptors. If it's just a bit warmer, the flake will grow thick and stubby. A bit colder, it'll stretch out wide, all lace and filigree. You're watching physics flirt with art. Historians still argue whether Wilson Bentley, the self-proclaimed snowflake man, truly captured the first perfect flake on camera in 1885, or if some earlier, lesser-known inventor beat him to it using smoked glass and patience. What isn't debated is Bentley's obsession. He once wrote, "Every crystal was a masterpiece." You can almost hear him sighing, pencil in mitten, out in a Vermont blizzard. As the flake descends, it passes through layers of the atmosphere with slightly different conditions. Maybe a layer is colder suddenly, side branches sprout like antlers. Maybe there's a patch of drier air growth slows down. The flake becomes a little lopsided, like it tripped on its way down but kept dancing anyway. Not every snowflake survives the fall, of course. Some melt. Others collide and stick, becoming misshapen clusters. But yours is still intact. And it's developed a kind of personality, which is a funny thing to say about frozen water, but here we are. Some researchers have spent entire careers trying to categorize snowflake types. Plates, dendrites, columns, needles, bullet rosettes. Honestly, it sounds like a list of Dungeons and Dragons spells. And some of these categories blur together, especially when flakes twist mid-air or fracture on impact. One fringe theory even suggested that some snowflakes form without nuclei-pure water vapor, condensing mid-air through electrical charge. Most scientists raise a skeptical eyebrow at that. But hey, the world of frozen water is full of quiet surprises. You keep descending alongside your flake, now fully formed. It's maybe 5 millimeters across. Under a microscope, it would look like a cathedral window, if that window was made by an engineer with OCD and a fondness for fractals. Its arms are symmetrical, but if you zoom in close enough, you'll see the imperfections. No two arms are truly identical. One might have grown just a split second longer. Another might have collided with a neighboring flake during descent. That phrase, "no two snowflakes are alike," isn't just poetic, it's practical. The odds of identical formation paths, molecule by molecule, are essentially non-existent. So there you are, still drifting down through silence with your icy companion. Around you, more flakes begin to appear, a slow-motion glitterfall. There's a kind of camaraderie in it, a gentle surrender to gravity. 1,000 tiny architects free-falling through layers of whispering cloud. Below you, the ground is still distant. But soon, you'll feel that first touch, the delicate crunch of contact. The beginning of a blanket. But we're not quite there yet. First, let's take a closer look at what makes your snowflake tick: the hidden architecture, the strange geometry, the quiet laws it obeys. Because while it may look like just another flake, it's got secrets written in ice. Your snowflake is no longer just a baby hexagon drifting through cloud fluff. It's blossomed into something intricate, fragile, yes, but also geometrically bold. You hover beside it, spinning slowly in the thin air. Each of its 6 arms fans outward in nearly perfect symmetry, like a frozen Ferris wheel engineered by nature's most sleep-deprived mathematician. This symmetry isn't just aesthetic, it's structural. It's chemistry doing ballet. The six-sidedness of snowflakes comes from the way water molecules bond when they freeze. Each molecule forms hydrogen bonds with 4 others, but thanks to the angles of those bonds and the bent shape of water, the molecules arrange into a hexagonal lattice. You might not be able to see it happening, but in your mind's eye, you can picture the molecules whispering, "6 is chic." That structure grows outward, radiating from the center. Each arm develops under the same conditions, so they should be identical. But here's the twist: snowflakes are liars. Well, not intentionally, but they're inconsistent artists. Even though they start with matching blueprints, the 6 arms often drift into asymmetry because no snowflake experiences a perfectly uniform environment on the way down. One side catches a breeze, another brushes against a droplet, one freezes faster, and suddenly, the once perfect flake looks a bit off. Lovably off, though, like a hand-knitted scarf with one loop that got too excited. You squint at the edges of your flake. There are branches, then branches off branches. That's called dendritic growth. It's like a tree growing trees. And it happens fast. Scientists have clocked certain flakes forming up to 1 billion molecules per second. No pressure. Now you start to notice something strange. Your flake's shape is subtly changing as you drift lower. The arms are stretching out more now. The tips are starting to curve. This isn't a design flaw, it's environmental feedback. Below 10 degrees C, snowflakes tend to sprout feathery, fern-like patterns. The colder the layer, the more elaborate the design. It's like frost with a flair for drama. This is what researchers call morphological instability, which sounds like a snowflake needs therapy. But really, it means tiny fluctuations in humidity and temperature push the flake's structure toward complexity. The outer edges are more exposed to vapor, so they grow faster than the center, leading to that dreamy, spindly silhouette. You remember those old science fair diagrams? The ones that showed neat little hexagons labeled snowflake? Lies. Those were just the templates. The reality, it's chaos, done softly. In fact, there's an entire classification system for snowflakes, developed by Nakaya Ukichiro, a Japanese physicist who literally built an indoor snowflake laboratory in the 1930s. He grew flakes artificially and mapped out how temperature affects their shape. His diagrams are like the periodic table of frozen whimsy. The guy once said, "Snowflakes are letters sent from the sky." That's either poetry or he was sleep-deprived and very cold. Either way, the metaphor stuck. And yes, historians still argue whether Nakaya's artificial flakes were real snowflakes. Some say without a natural nucleating particle, it's not authentic. Others argue it's the process, not the origin, that counts. If you ever find yourself at a snowflake science symposium, they exist. Bring popcorn. The debates are chilly but passionate. Meanwhile, your flake keeps evolving. You reach out gently and catch it on an invisible glove. The touch doesn't melt it, not yet. You're in this frozen dream, remember? As you spin it between imaginary fingers, you wonder, could it get any more complex? Actually, yes. Some flakes develop hollow columns. Others fuse into clusters. Some are shaped like bullets, capped with tiny stars. One particularly odd variant is the sectored plate, which looks like someone tried to make a snowflake using a medieval coin press. And yet, despite all that variation, they all stay true to their hexagonal nature. No pentagons, no octagons. Just 6 over and over. This is the kind of pattern that makes mathematicians giddy. There's an entire field of study around snowflake tiling, how those 6-sided forms might fill space, overlap, or model diffusion patterns. Which sounds like a weird party conversation, but hey, someone's gotta love frozen math. At this point, your flake is nearing the end of its architectural journey. It's not growing much more now, just fine-tuning, polishing its last edges, slowing its spin. Around you, other flakes drift by. Some are puffier, some are long and narrow. A few are just little shards, having lost pieces during turbulence. And yet, every one of them shares that same glinting calm, that barely there shimmer, that sense that even chaos under the right temperature can look gentle. As you begin to descend closer to Earth, the sky shifts from misty silver to a soft evening blue. Street lamps below are beginning to glow. They'll catch these flakes in their halos soon, making them sparkle like lazy fireflies. But don't rush it. There's still more to explore. We've seen the shape of the flake, but what about its origin story? Who were its silent collaborators? Because no snowflake makes it alone. You and your flake are still descending slowly, gently, like a sigh made visible. The air is growing a little denser now, the clouds thinning out into that pre-sunset haze where gold and lavender mingle. And while your snowflake glides effortlessly downward, it carries a secret at its core. A tiny, unlikely passenger. The nucleus. Remember back in Section 1 when that first speck kick-started everything? That speck so small it would never show up on a microscope slide was the real architect. Without it, your snowflake would still be vapor, floating around aimlessly like a lost thought. It took something tangible, even flawed, to begin the structure. That's nucleation. And the stars of that microscopic party? Well, they're weirder than you'd expect. Let's start with the usual suspects. Dust. Not glamorous, sure, but reliable. Tiny flecks of mineral dust from deserts or construction sites float all the way into the upper atmosphere, often lifted by powerful updrafts. These become the scaffolds upon which ice forms. But dust is only the beginning. Now add bacteria. Yes, you heard right. There are microbes, mostly Pseudomonas syringae, that drift into the air on bits of plant matter or soil, and they're astonishingly good at triggering ice formation. Like, suspiciously good. Their outer membranes mimic the structure of ice, which helps water vapor cling and crystallize more easily. Scientists originally thought this trait was accidental. Then someone asked, wait, what if they want to cause snow? And suddenly, things got dramatic. There's a theory still debated, obviously, that some bacteria evolved to encourage precipitation. By catalyzing ice formation, they help make rain or snow that falls back to the ground, spreading themselves across forests and crops. It's like microbial parachuting. Historians still argue whether this counts as weather manipulation or just being a really pushy microbe. But it doesn't stop at bacteria. Pollen grains, fungal spores, even volcanic ash can act as nucleation sites. Picture that. A volcano erupts in Iceland, sending ash sky high. Weeks later, in Vermont, someone catches a snowflake on their mitten. Inside, a smidge of volcanic memory wearing a coat of ice. And that's the quiet magic of snow. Every flake contains a piece of the world, sometimes quite literally. You glance again at your flake, now tumbling more than spinning. It's stable but no longer symmetrical. One side has thickened. Another is chipped. It's weathering the turbulence like a sleepy dancer wobbling mid-turn. Still graceful. Still composed. Just a little out of breath. If you were to put it under an electron microscope now, you'd see a hazy core. Not sharp, not crystalline. That's the impurity, the seed. And around it, millions of water molecules aligned with obsessive precision, stacking like mirrored bookshelves. But the core, it's fuzzy. Organic, mysterious. Scientists still can't predict snowflake shapes with absolute certainty. They can model tendencies like, at this temperature, plates are more likely, but individual flake formation is chaotic. It's like trying to predict the shape of a campfire. You can describe the general behavior, but each flicker is unique. And yet, there's a pattern. A softness in the chaos. You could spend a lifetime catching snowflakes and never find a repeat, but you'd always find a rhythm. 6 arms, ice branches, a central silence. Let's go fringe for a second. There's a pseudoscientific belief that snowflakes form differently, depending on the energy or emotion around them. This theory got popular in the early 2000s, when some folks tried freezing water while playing music, then photographing the crystals. The claim? Beethoven made elegant flakes. Heavy metal made jagged ones. Most scientists rolled their eyes so hard they saw behind the theory. Still, there's a poetic charm in the idea that water remembers. That snowflakes might carry echoes of sound, movement, even mood. And honestly, even if it's not true, it's a lovely bedtime thought. Back to the atmosphere. You're now below the cloud layer. Your snowflake has drifted past pockets of air with just enough turbulence to jostle its edges. It's colder here, colder but drier, which means the flake isn't growing anymore. It's stabilizing, entering its final form. Look around, you're not alone. Billions of flakes fall with you. Some collide midair and fuse. Others bounce apart like icy bumper cars. A few evaporate entirely, ghosting into vapor before they ever touch the ground. A silent tragedy. Or maybe just a scenic reroute. And down below, the world is quiet. Trees are dusted with frost. Power lines sag slightly under soft white coats. A frozen lake gleams like a forgotten mirror. You realize that every inch of that snowpack started the same way dust, plus vapor, plus time. Somewhere, a child sticks out their tongue. A flake lands, melts, and disappears. A billion molecules, gone in an instant, and they'll never know they were holding the tiniest piece of a cloud-born story. Meanwhile, your flake keeps falling. Nearly there now. But before it lands, let's pull back and look at the other side of snow obsession, the human one. The collectors, the painters, the quietly intense snowflake societies. Because while flakes may vanish on contact, some people dedicate their lives to chasing the ephemeral. You're still floating just a few hundred meters above the earth now. The light has softened into a deep dusk, that shade of indigo where everything looks like a velvet painting. The snowflake in your palm, if we can still pretend you're holding it, has slowed its spiral. It's ready to touch down, to melt quietly into the folds of a scarf or the grooves of a windowsill. But before that happens, let's shift our gaze. Look just a little to the side, and you'll notice a curious human shape crouched near a fence post. Thick gloves, fogged-up glasses, a magnifying lens taped to a phone. They're trying, once again, to capture the impossible, a perfectly preserved snowflake in the wild before it vanishes. This isn't a random hobbyist. It's part of a long tradition. Humans have been obsessed with snowflakes for centuries, documenting, sketching, and studying their fleeting beauty with near-religious reverence. The most famous of these enthusiasts? A farmer named Wilson Bentley. Back in the late 1800s in rural Vermont, Bentley built a contraption using a bellows camera and a microscope lens. He stood outside for hours in the snow, catching flakes on black velvet, photographing them before they melted. He took over 5,000 images in his lifetime. His nickname? Snowflake Bentley. A name that sounds like a whimsical children's book character, but this guy was a total snowflake realist. He once wrote, "Every crystal was a masterpiece of design, and no one design was ever repeated." That quote ended up in school books, coffee mugs, and probably 1,000 Etsy prints. But back then, people thought he was kind of odd. Obsessed, a little too invested in frozen water. Historians still argue whether Bentley's work was science or art, or a quiet blend of both. Some academics saw his photos as beautiful, but too inconsistent for rigorous study. Others called them revolutionary, a bridge between science, nature, and personal wonder. Either way, Bentley wasn't in it for fame. He just loved snow. And he's not alone. There are entire snowflake clubs now. Forums, workshops, microphotography tutorials. Snowflake hunters armed with freezing fingers and increasingly fancy DSLR setups continue Bentley's legacy every winter. They share photos like trophies, each one captioned with temperature, humidity, and a quick note like, "Caught this one on my glove while feeding the chickens." Then you've got snowflake painters. Seriously, artists who spend hours recreating flakes by hand, using watercolors or even thread and embroidery. The level of detail they capture? Unbelievable, and probably not recommended for anyone with a caffeine habit. One lesser-known example, Dion Lucas, a 20th century artist who embroidered hundreds of snowflake replicas using silver thread on deep navy velvet. No gallery show, no big social media account. She just did it. For years, her family discovered her collection after she passed. A quiet blizzard, stitched in secret. But snowflake fascination isn't limited to the West. In traditional Japanese aesthetics, snowflakes were admired for their fleeting elegance. In Edo period art, there are delicate woodblock prints of snow falling on bridges and temples, tiny flakes rendered with a single soft brushstroke. And in some indigenous Alaskan cultures, snow is more than weather, it's a language. The Yupik and Inupiat peoples, for instance, have dozens of nuanced terms for different kinds of snow. Not just wet snow or powdery snow, but words that describe how it clings, how it crunches, how it changes after walking on it. One term roughly translates to snow that's good for sledding but bad for walking. Precision born from generations of lived experience. These linguistic subtleties aren't poetic flourishes, they're survival tools. When your life depends on reading the snow correctly, words become sensory maps. You float past a cabin now. Candlelight flickers in the window. A kettle whistles inside. On the sill, a child has pressed a piece of dark glass outside, hoping to catch a flake like the ones they saw in a book. You watch as one lands, whole and gleaming. They blink, it's gone. That's the tragedy and the magic of snowflakes, they never last. Which, of course, is exactly why we keep trying to save them. To draw them, photograph them, understand them. Because they're tiny, symmetrical reminders that even the most fleeting things can be beautiful, can be worth pausing for. Let's take it one notch weirder, because you've earned that by now. In 2022, researchers in the Netherlands attempted to 3D print artificial snowflakes. Why? To study light scattering. And because, well, why not? They created synthetic flakes based on observed geometries, down to micron-level detail. And sure, they weren't cold snowflakes, but they shimmered just the same. That said, there's still debate over whether a man-made flake, printed from resin or frozen in a lab, has the same soul. Maybe that's a silly question. But maybe, like Bentley and his black velvet, what matters isn't how a flake is made, but that someone looked closely enough to care. You're almost at ground level now. A soft drift carries you toward a forest clearing where the snow piles thick and untouched. The trees creak faintly. A fox leaves prints you can barely see. The world is wrapped in silence, broken only by the occasional sigh of wind or crunch of boot steps from somewhere just out of frame. And in this stillness, surrounded by nature's white confetti, you understand the whole point of this journey. Snowflakes aren't just frozen water. They're frozen stories, each one shaped by physics, chaos, and the quiet work of time. But the journey's not over yet, because now that your flake is about to land, what happens next? Your flake descends now, drifting the final few feet like a feather with purpose. There's no applause, no drumroll, just gravity doing its soft, inevitable job. And at last, the flake meets the surface, an untouched mound of snow, pillowy and serene, the top layer so fluffy it might as well be holding its breath. But landing isn't the end. It's just the start of another chapter. Because what happens to a snowflake after it touches down depends on dozens of silent, unseen factors. It might stay perfectly preserved for hours locked in a quiet snowbank beneath a star-filled sky. Or it could begin melting immediately, slipping out of existence before anyone ever knew it was there. Tonight, let's pretend it gets lucky. Imagine that your snowflake settles in a meadow just out of the wind's reach. It nestles between pine needles and moss, joining millions of others in a dense, lacy quilt. It isn't alone anymore, though. Like humans at a party, each flake keeps a respectful distance, separated by thin pockets of air. This is the start of snowpack, layered snow that accumulates across weeks or months, slowly transforming from fluff to something far more complex. Over time, that delicate geometry begins to collapse under its own weight. Crystals interlock, compress, and change shape. Those lovely branches? Gone. Rounded. Blunted. Snow doesn't stay snowy forever. It evolves, becomes something denser, granular. Eventually, if left undisturbed, that snowpack can become firn, a transitional state between snow and glacier ice. Firn is firm, appropriately named, but still porous, like a sponge that forgot what water is. Leave firn alone long enough under the right pressures. It becomes glacial ice, deep, blue, ancient, holding secrets from centuries past. In this way, your little flake might someday become part of a glacier, a frozen timeline, a slow-moving river of memory. Inside, it'll be squeezed alongside other flakes from other centuries. Some formed when dinosaurs still ruled, some when the first humans shaped tools from stone. Historians still argue whether the deepest layers of glacier ice can truly preserve trace gases and isotopes from ancient eras. But ice core samples drilled from places like Antarctica and Greenland have given us insight into prehistoric climates. Each layer, a fingerprint from a specific year. Snowflakes, trapped and transformed, whispering secrets to future scientists. But most flakes don't make it that far. The vast majority? They melt. That melt can be gentle, a daytime sunbeam, a warm gust of air, or chaotic, a shoveled driveway, a slushy boot print, the unfortunate trajectory of a yellowing patch near a fire hydrant. But even melting has its poetry. When your flake dissolves, it doesn't disappear. Its molecules drift into the soil, feed tree roots, soak into underground aquifers. Eventually, some become part of a stream, a river, a glass of drinking water, maybe even the steam rising from a kettle years later. There's something humbling about that. Your flake might return to the clouds, ride the wind again, start over. It might land as rain this time, or sleet, or not at all. But if we pull back even further, if we zoom out to the biggest scale, we find the real truth. The chemistry of snowflakes is part of a larger cosmic cycle. Because those oxygen atoms? They were formed in the hearts of ancient stars billions of years ago. The hydrogen, even older, primordial, forged just moments after the Big Bang. So in a way, that snowflake, simple, seasonal, short-lived, is also an artifact of cosmic time. You're not just watching weather. You're watching stardust fall in slow motion. And speaking of stardust, let's indulge one final peculiar anecdote. In 2016, a group of researchers suggested that Earth receives snow made of organic compounds from interstellar space. These aren't snowflakes in the way we think of them. No six-pointed symmetry, no frozen breath of winter, but they behave similarly. Microscopic crystals, formed in cold clouds between stars, drifting through space and settling on planets. Cosmic dandruff, if you will. If this theory holds up, it means our world is constantly, quietly snowed on by the universe itself. That doesn't make your average blizzard any easier to shovel, but it's a beautiful thought. Now your flake is gone, either melted into the earth or pressed invisibly into a glacier. But its story lingers, not just in data or structure, but in how you felt watching it fall. In the brief moment you paused to wonder how something so small could be so complex, so temporary, so universal. And maybe that's the gift snowflakes offer us. They don't last. They're hard to study, impossible to keep. But they're also free, abundant, and astonishingly detailed if we just take the time to look. Like so many beautiful things in life, they only ask to be noticed. And now, let's wind down. You're still lying back in that snowy clearing. The world is wrapped in quiet. No wind, no movement. Just the soft hush of winter surrounding you like a blanket stitched from silence. Above, the sky has deepened to midnight blue. Stars blink lazily into view, each one softly pulsing like a memory trying to surface. The snow beneath you is cold, but not unkind. It cradles you, anchors you. You close your eyes, and the world doesn't disappear, it just softens. The flakes you imagined, the frozen clouds, the velvet darkness, they're still there. Just quieter now, more distant, as if slipping behind a curtain of sleep. Your breath is slow. Your muscles release their hold. No more questions to chase. No more facts to hold tightly. Just a calm trust that the snow falls whether we're watching or not. That the universe continues to spin, gently and without rush. Somewhere a kettle whistles. Somewhere else, a glacier creaks under the weight of time. And somewhere, maybe right outside your window, a snowflake lands and no one sees it. And it's still beautiful. Let that be enough. So sink a little deeper. Let the night hold you. Let the science drift into dreams. Sleep well, my friend.